Most people are walking through life with a broken compass, and they don't even know it. They think they are following the rules, but they are missing the ones that actually make people like you, trust you, and want to be around you. There is a secret language happening all around you right now, and if you don't speak it, you are basically playing the game of life on the hardest setting possible without realizing it. We are going to break down the 25 unwritten codes of human behavior that nobody taught you in school, but everyone expects you to know. If you stay until the end, you will understand why some people seem to get everything they want, while others struggle just to be heard. But first, we have to look at the one mistake that is probably killing your relationships right now, without you saying a single word. You've felt it before. You are explaining something that actually matters to you, something real, and you look at the person across from you. You can see their eyes searching for a gap. You can almost see the gears turning in their head as they build their rebuttal. They aren't listening to understand you. They are listening to respond. It's not because they're a bad person. It's a habit we all have. We were taught that communication is about having a point and making it count. We were taught to be quick. But the real power in any room isn't in having the next word. It is in giving someone else the space to finish theirs. In this world, we are constantly bombarded with noise, social media, work emails, family demands. Everyone wants a piece of your brain. Because of that, we've developed this survival mechanism where we try to get our thoughts out as fast as possible before we get interrupted. But that speed is exactly what is killing our connections. We have stopped being human beings and started being broadcast stations. We are just sending out signals and hoping someone picks them up, but nobody is actually tuning in to the frequency. Think of human interaction like a giant, invisible spider web. Every time you speak, you are pulling on a thread. If you pull too hard or too fast, the web snaps. But if you move with the rhythm of the other person, the web stays strong, and you can actually build something beautiful. This is the concept of social gravity. Most people have heavy personalities. They are so full of their own ego and their own need to be right that they pull everyone else down. But the people who master these 25 rules, they are light. They create a space where other people feel like they can float. They are the people you want to be around because they make you feel like the best version of yourself. We are going to go deep today. I'm talking about the psychological gear work that happens behind the scenes of every conversation you have. Whether you're living in a tech hub like Lehi, Utah, or you're halfway across the world, these rules are universal. They work in boardrooms and they work at the dinner table. They work when you're talking to your boss, and they work when you're trying to get your one-year-old to stop crying. This is the manual for being a person that you never got. If you get this right, your life will start to feel like it's on easy mode. You'll find that people are more willing to help you. You'll find that arguments don't spiral out of control. You'll find that you actually have more energy because you aren't wasting it on social friction. But if you ignore these rules, you'll keep hitting the same walls over and over, wondering why people are so difficult. They aren't difficult. You just don't have the right key for the lock. And here's what nobody tells you. The first rule is so counterintuitive that when I explain it, you're going to think I'm wrong. You're going to want to argue with me. But I've tested this with thousands of conversations, and every single time it works. Let's start with rule number 1, the foundation of every single thing that follows. Listening to understand means you have to drop the need to be the smartest person in the room. You have to stop trying to be clever or right. You just have to tune in. You listen to the pace of their voice, the tension in their shoulders, and those tiny pauses where the real meaning is hiding. Most of us are so afraid of silence that we fill it with our own noise. We think that by talking, we are providing value, but value often comes from the space you leave for others. I spent a lot of time working in tech support. If you've ever done that job, you know it can be a nightmare. You're on the phone with people who are already frustrated, their internet is down, or their computer won't turn on, and they just want someone to blame. For the first few months, I was terrible at it. I would hear a keyword, like router or password, and I would immediately cut the person off to tell them the fix. I thought I was being efficient. I thought I was being the expert. But the customers hated me. They would get even angrier. They would ask for my manager. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, something happened that changed everything. I had this customer who was screaming about his service being out. His voice was raw, like he'd been yelling all morning. I didn't interrupt. I let him scream for 3 straight minutes. I just sat there in my office in Lehigh, looking out the window at the snow-covered mountains, and I let him vent. When he finally ran out of breath, I didn't give him a tech tip. I didn't tell him to restart his router. I just said, "That sounds incredibly frustrating. I can hear how much this is messing up your day." There was this long silence on the other end of the line. I thought maybe the call had dropped, but then his voice changed completely. He got quiet, almost vulnerable. He said, "Yeah, it is. I have a sick 1-year-old at home and I'm trying to get a doctor's appointment scheduled, but the portal won't load because the internet keeps dropping. I'm terrified I'm going to miss the window and she won't get seen today." The internet wasn't the problem. His fear for his daughter was the problem. The technical issue was just the trigger. Because I listened to understand, because I gave him space to be heard, I was able to help him as a person, not just a customer. We fixed the internet in about 10 seconds after that. I helped him get the appointment portal loaded, and he actually thanked me. He said, "You're the first person today who treated me like I matter." That moment taught me something profound about human psychology. When you listen to understand, you are lowering the other person's cortisol levels. You are telling their brain, "You are safe. I am not a threat." This is what psychologists call the WAIT technique. W-A-I-T. Why am I talking? If you can ask yourself that question every 10 seconds in a conversation, you will become a master communicator. You have to realize that most people aren't looking for an answer. They are looking for a witness. They want to know that their reality exists in someone else's mind. They want confirmation that what they're experiencing is real and valid. When you give them that, something magical happens. The defensiveness melts away, the walls come down, and suddenly you're not having an argument anymore. You're having a conversation. Here's the thing though, this only works if you actually care about understanding them. People can smell fake empathy from a mile away. If you're just waiting for your turn to talk, they'll know. Your body language will give you away. Your eyes will glaze over. You'll start nodding too quickly, like you're trying to speed them up so you can get to your point. Real listening looks different. It's slower. It's patient. You're not thinking about what you're going to say next. You're genuinely curious about what they mean. You might ask a question like, "Can you help me understand what that felt like for you?" Or, "What was going through your mind when that happened?" These aren't interrogation questions. They're invitations to go deeper. And here's what's wild. When you do this consistently, people start seeking you out. They start trusting you with things they don't tell anyone else. You become the person they call when life gets hard. Not because you have all the answers, but because you have something more valuable, the ability to make them feel heard. But here's the catch that nobody talks about. Listening to understand is only half the equation, because once you've actually heard what someone is saying, you have to figure out how to interact with them without it becoming a fight. Most people enter every conversation like it's a battle with winners and losers, but there is a way to make sure everyone wins. And if you don't know how to create a win-win, you are going to spend your life surrounded by people who feel like they've been cheated. Which brings us to the second rule, one that completely changed how I approach every negotiation, every argument, and even every decision about what to watch on Netflix. Most people enter a disagreement thinking someone has to lose. They think that if one side gets more, the other has to get less. It's like they think there is a limited amount of winning in the world, and they have to grab their piece before it's gone. But that assumption is what leaves the best solutions on the table. The idea of a win-win outcome isn't just business jargon. It is rooted in how our brains handle cooperation. It's about solving problems in a way that benefits everyone instead of framing every single situation as a contest. Think about 2 roommates arguing over who gets the larger bedroom. This happens all the time. One person says, "I got here first," and the other says, "I have more stuff." If one person just wins, the other person is going to be bitter for the next 12 months. Every time they see that big room, they're going to feel a tiny bit of resentment. That resentment will leak into other things. They won't do the dishes. They won't take the trash out. The win actually cost the winner more in the long run. But what if they reframe it? The person with the bigger room pays an extra $50 a month in rent, or the person with the smaller room gets the better parking spot, or they switch rooms halfway through the lease. Suddenly, both people walk away feeling considered and respected. This taps into something deep in human psychology: fairness, autonomy, and motivation. People are way more cooperative when they don't feel like they are being cornered. Win-win thinking actually leads to creative ideas that wouldn't even come up if you were just trying to win. Your brain stops looking for ways to defeat the other person and starts looking for ways to solve the underlying problem. That shift in perspective is massive. I used to be a guy who had to win every single argument. Whether it was a work meeting or deciding what movie to watch, I had to be the one who came out on top. I thought it showed strength. I thought people would respect me more if I always got my way. But what I was actually doing was building a life full of people who felt less than. I was building a network of people who were just waiting for me to fail so they could get their win back. I'll never forget the moment I realized how toxic this was. I was working with a client on an SEO project. They wanted to rank for a keyword that I knew was too competitive for their budget. I could have just taken their money and done the work, knowing it probably wouldn't succeed. That would have been a win for me in the short term. I get paid, they get disappointed later. But instead, I proposed something different. I said, look, I could chase that keyword for you, but honestly, it's going to eat up your entire budget and you probably won't see results for a year. What if we target these 3 related keywords instead? They're easier to rank for, you'll start seeing traffic in 3 months, and then we can use that momentum to go after the big one later. At first, they were skeptical. They really wanted that one keyword. But I showed them the data. I showed them examples of other clients who had taken this approach and succeeded, and they agreed to try it my way. 3 months later, their traffic had tripled. They were getting leads they never expected, and when they came back to renew the contract, they didn't just renew, they doubled their budget. Because I aimed for the win-win, I got a long-term partner who trusts me. If I had just taken the win in the moment, I would have had a one-time client who felt like I wasted their money. Here's what most people don't understand. Win-win thinking reflects a mindset that values cooperation over competition. It builds trust over time. When people see you aiming for mutual benefit, not just your own advantage, they are more likely to return the gesture. This creates what psychologists call a reciprocity loop. You help them, they help you, and before you know it, you've built a relationship that's stronger than any transaction. But win-win isn't about being a pushover. It's not about letting the other person take advantage of you. It's about being creative enough to find solutions that work for both sides. Sometimes that means you have to ask better questions. Instead of, how do I get what I want, you ask, what does this person actually need, and how can I give them that while also getting what I need? I've used this approach in everything from salary negotiations to deciding whose family we visit for the holidays, and every single time it works better than trying to win. Because here's the truth. Even when you win an argument, if the other person walks away feeling defeated, you've actually lost. You've damaged the relationship. You've created resentment, and that resentment will come back to bite you later. But here's the thing nobody tells you about win-win thinking. Even when everyone wins, how you handle that success matters, because if you praise someone the wrong way, you might actually be setting them up for failure. There is a way to give a compliment that builds a person up for life, and there is a way to give one that makes them quit next time things get hard. And the difference between the two comes down to just a few words, which is exactly what we're diving into next. When someone accomplishes something impressive, it's easy to say, "You're so talented," or "You're a natural." It feels like a great thing to say. You're giving them praise, you're making them feel good. But there's a deeper kind of praise, one that focuses not just on what they did, but how hard they worked to do it. The psychology behind this is rooted in something called growth mindset theory. Developed by psychologist Carol Dweck, it explains how people respond to success and failure based on the kind of feedback they receive. When we praise results alone, like a high grade or a big sales number, people often start to link their value to that end product. They start to think, I am only valuable because I won. This makes them fragile. If they don't win next time, they feel like they've lost their talent. They get scared to take risks because they don't want to lose that talented label. But when we recognize effort, it encourages resilience, persistence, and long-term motivation. If a kid builds a cool Lego tower and you say, "You're such a great builder," you are praising the result. But if you say, "I noticed how you kept your balance for like 5 full seconds that time," That's 3 seconds longer than your last try. You're figuring out the weight shift thing." His whole face changed. He looked at me like I'd just told him a secret. "Really?" he said. "Yeah," I told him. "You're learning the mechanics. Your brain is literally building new pathways right now. That's really cool." He got back on the bike immediately. And you know what? He fell 7 more times that afternoon. But he didn't get frustrated because I'd shifted his focus from "I need to be good at this" to "I'm learning this." 2 days later, he was riding without training wheels. This principle applies to your coworkers, your friends, and your partners. Telling a colleague, "I noticed how carefully you handled that situation," reinforces behaviors they chose, not just results they achieved. It tells them that the process matters, that the effort matters, that even when things don't work out perfectly, their approach was valuable. I see this all the time with my dog Louie. He's a goofy Bernese mountain dog, and sometimes he's not the fastest learner. If I only gave him a treat when he did a trick perfectly, he'd get frustrated and walk away. But if I reward the effort, the fact that he's trying to listen, even if his butt is still in the air when it should be on the ground, he stays engaged. He keeps trying. Effort-based praise supports emotional well-being because it's rooted in something people can keep doing. It rewards the process, not just the moment, and that helps people stay motivated, learn from setbacks, and take pride in how they show up, even when the outcome is still unfolding. Here's what's fascinating. When you start complimenting effort instead of just outcomes, you'll notice people start taking more risks. They stop being so afraid of failure because they know that even if they don't succeed, you'll still see the value in what they attempted. And that safety, that permission to try and fail is what creates real growth. I started doing this with my team at work, and the change was remarkable. Instead of saying, "Great job on hitting quota," I started saying things like, "I really respect how you stayed persistent with that difficult client even when they kept pushing back." Guess what happened? People started tackling harder projects. They stopped playing it safe because they knew I valued the effort, not just the win. But here's the paradox nobody warns you about. No matter how much effort someone puts in, things are going to get messy. People are going to screw up. You are going to screw up. When that happens, most people go into defense mode. They start pointing fingers. They build walls. But there's a secret to resolving conflict that involves owning a very specific slice of the problem. And when I learned this technique, it literally saved a friendship I thought was dead. Let me show you what I mean. This idea comes from conflict resolution and behavioral psychology. In any disagreement, responsibility is almost never one-sided. Even if the other person started it or they did something objectively worse, you usually have a slice of the mess. Maybe you reacted too quickly. Maybe you used a tone that was a bit too sharp. Maybe you waited too long to speak up. Conversations go nowhere when both people focus only on defending themselves. It's like two people standing on opposite sides of a canyon screaming about how the other person should build the bridge. If you want to move forward, you have to own your slice first. When you start by acknowledging your own part, however small, it lowers the other person's defensiveness. Psychologically, this works because it activates reciprocity. When one person shows vulnerability or takes responsibility, the other person is much more likely to do the same. It shifts the dynamic from opposition to collaboration. I remember a time when I was managing a small team on a website redesign project. There was a huge mistake. We launched the new site and half the links were broken. I was furious. I walked into the meeting ready to lay into everyone. I had my list of who did what wrong. I was ready for battle. But right as I opened my mouth to start the blame parade, something stopped me. I realized that I hadn't actually checked in with them for 3 days leading up to the launch. I had been so busy with my own stuff, other clients, personal issues, a sick kid at home, that I hadn't given them the support they needed. I hadn't reviewed the final checklist. I hadn't done the walkthrough I said I would do. So instead of starting with "Why did you guys mess this up?" I took a breath and said, "I realize I haven't been as available as I should have been this week. I didn't do the final review I promised, and that probably made it harder for you guys to catch these issues. I own that." The energy in the room shifted instantly. You could feel it. People's shoulders relaxed. Eye contact came back. And here's what's wild. My team didn't use my admission as an excuse to slack off. Instead, they all started owning their parts too. One person admitted they didn't ask for help when they were stuck on something. Another admitted they rushed through a final check because they were trying to meet the deadline. A third person said they saw a potential issue but didn't speak up because they thought someone else would catch it. We fixed the problem in 20 minutes. 20 minutes! Because we stopped defending ourselves and started owning our slices. Here's what most people get wrong about this. They think owning your slice means taking the blame for everything. It doesn't. It just means going first. It means focusing on what you control. It signals that you're here to understand and solve the problem, not just to be right. I had a friendship that almost died because neither of us would own our slice. We got into an argument about something stupid. I can't even remember what it was about now. But the argument escalated. Words were said, feelings were hurt, and then we both just stopped talking to each other. 6 months went by. 6 months of weird silence. We'd see each other at mutual friends' events and just nod awkwardly. It was terrible. I missed my friend, but I was still mad. And I kept thinking, they should apologize first. They're the one who said that horrible thing. But then one night I was lying in bed, unable to sleep, and I realized something. Even if they said the horrible thing first, I had said horrible things back. Even if they started it, I had escalated it. I had my slice of the mess. And by refusing to own it, I was choosing pride over friendship. So I sent a text, just a simple one. Hey, I've been thinking about our fight. I know we both said things we regret, but I want to own my part. I escalated when I should have stepped back. I'm sorry for that. They responded within 5 minutes. I'm sorry too. I've been wanting to reach out but didn't know how. That was it. Friendship restored, all because someone was willing to own their slice first. In many cases, that one small admission is what turns a standstill into a breakthrough. It's what transforms an argument into a conversation. And here's the beautiful thing. When you get good at this, conflicts actually become opportunities. Opportunities to understand each other better. Opportunities to strengthen the relationship. Because nothing bonds people like working through hard stuff together. But what if the other person is the one who is hurting? What if they come to you in pain? Most of us want to fix the problem immediately. We want to be helpful. We want to make it better. But there is a step you are probably skipping. A step that is making the other person feel even worse. And I didn't understand this until I made a massive mistake with someone I love. A friend says, "I'm just so tired of everything right now." And before they even finish the sentence, you are already listing things they could try. More sleep, a walk, maybe a vacation. Have you tried meditation? What about cutting back on caffeine? You've probably done this. I've definitely done this. It's automatic. We don't want to see the people we love in pain, so we try to build a bridge over the pain as fast as possible. But in that moment, what they really needed was to feel understood. The idea behind mirror feelings first, fixes can wait is simple but powerful. When people share emotional struggles, their first need isn't usually advice, it's validation. They want to know that you see their heart, not just their problem. Mirroring feelings doesn't mean repeating everything back like a robot. It means naming or reflecting the emotion they're expressing in a calm, clear way. If someone says, "I feel stuck," a mirrored response might be, "That sounds really frustrating." No suggestions yet, just acknowledgement. What this does is lower emotional resistance. When someone feels seen and understood, they are much more open to conversation and even later problem solving. If you skip this step and go straight into "here's what to do," it can come off as dismissive even if your intentions are good. It feels like you're saying, "Your problem is so simple that I can solve it in 5 seconds, so why are you complaining?" I learned this lesson the hard way with my wife. A few years ago, she was going through a really difficult time at work. Her boss was micromanaging her, her projects kept getting rejected, and she felt like she couldn't do anything right. She'd come home every night exhausted and defeated. And every night, I'd try to fix it. "Have you tried talking to HR? Maybe you should look for a new job. What if you just ignore your boss and do things your way?" I thought I was being supportive. I thought I was being a good partner. But one night, she just snapped at me. "Can you please stop trying to fix everything? I don't need solutions right now. I just need you to listen." I was stunned. I thought fixing was listening, but it's not. Fixing is fixing. Listening is different. So I tried something new. The next night, when she came home stressed, I didn't offer a single suggestion. I just said, "That sounds really hard. Your boss is making you feel like nothing you do is good enough." She looked at me like she'd never seen me before, and then she started crying. Not sad crying, relief crying. She said, "Yes, exactly. Thank you for getting it." We sat there for 20 minutes while she just talked. I didn't fix anything, I didn't solve anything. I just listened and occasionally reflected back what I heard. "So you felt dismissed when he ignored your email. It sounds like you're worried this will affect your career." And you know what happened? By the end of the conversation, she had figured out her own solution. She didn't need me to solve it, she just needed space to process it out loud with someone who wasn't judging or rushing her. Psychologically, this taps into a basic human need, emotional validation. We all want to know that what we're feeling makes sense to someone else. When that happens, the brain starts to calm down, making people more able to process their thoughts and consider next steps. Mirroring feelings isn't complicated, but it takes awareness. You're listening not just for facts, but for tone, energy, and emotion. It's a pause before the plan, and that small pause can change the whole direction of a conversation for the better. I see this with my 1-year-old too. When he's crying because he can't get a block to fit, I could just go over and do it for him, but that doesn't help him learn and it doesn't help him feel supported. If I just say, "That's really hard, isn't it? You're frustrated," he usually calms down. He just wants to know that I see his struggle. Once he's calm, we can figure out the blocks together. Here's what's wild. When you start mirroring feelings instead of rushing to fixes, people actually solve their own problems faster because they're not spending energy defending their emotions anymore. They're not trying to convince you that their feelings are valid. They can just move through them and get to clarity on the other side. But life can't always be serious and heavy. If you're always mirroring feelings and owning slices, you're going to be exhausting to be around. You need humor. You need lightness. But not the kind of humor that feels like a performance. There is a way to use humor that actually brings people closer, but it requires you to be present in the moment. And the day I figured this out, I went from the guy with the rehearsed jokes to someone people actually wanted to spend time with. There's a reason the same joke gets a laugh once and an eye roll the third time. Humor relies on surprise, and repetition kills surprise. In psychology, this is tied to what's called habituation, the brain's tendency to stop reacting to things it's seen before. A fresh joke activates attention and reward systems. A stale one gets filtered out like background noise. That's not just about punchlines. It applies to your tone, your timing, and even the self-deprecating bits you might fall back on. When people use the same lines over and over, at work, in conversations, or online, it can feel safe and predictable, but it also risks becoming a performance that disconnects instead of connecting. People don't just laugh at jokes, they respond to novelty, presence, and relevance. Fresh humor isn't about being clever all the time, it's about noticing what's happening right now in this moment. What small absurdity just happened that only we noticed together? That's where humor lands best, when it's alive. Think of it like improv, not a stand-up special. You're not reciting something polished, you're responding to the room, the energy, the weirdness of reality. That's why the same friend can make you laugh in a dozen different ways, because they're in the moment with you, not recycling the greatest hits. I used to be terrible at this. I had about 5 stories that I'd tell at parties. The same 5 stories with the same punchlines delivered in the same way. I thought they were good stories because they'd gotten big laughs the first time. But what I didn't notice was that the same people were at multiple parties. They'd heard my stories, and by the 3rd or 4th telling, they weren't laughing anymore. They were just politely smiling and waiting for me to finish. I remember being at a really tense family Christmas party one year. The air was thick with old arguments and people being polite but cold. My aunt and uncle weren't speaking, my dad was being passive-aggressive about something, everyone was walking on eggshells. And I was about to launch into one of my classic stories, the one about the time I accidentally locked myself out of my apartment in my underwear, when my dog, Louie, decided to help by carrying a huge, unwrapped Christmas ham across the living room. He'd somehow gotten it off the counter. This massive ham in his mouth, just walking through the room like it was the most normal thing in the world. For a second, everyone just stared, and I had a choice. I could ignore it and tell my rehearsed story, or I could be present. So I just looked at Louis and said completely deadpan, "Louis, I told you the ham was for the 25th, not the 24th. We talked about this." The room erupted. People laughed harder than I'd ever heard at any of my polished stories, because it was fresh. It was right there in front of us. It was a shared moment that would never happen again. That's when I realized that the best humor isn't in your back pocket. It's in the room with you. It's in the weird things that happen, the unexpected moments, the small absurdities of being human together. When humor feels tired or automatic, it might be a sign to update your lens. What used to work might not anymore, and that's okay. Humor evolves with you. Keeping it fresh isn't just about being funny, it's about being real, being attentive, and choosing connection over routine. Here's the thing. Rehearsed humor creates distance. It's you performing for them. Fresh humor creates closeness. It's you being with them. And people remember the second one way more than the first. But you can't be attentive and present if you are constantly being pulled away by the little rectangular robot in your pocket. This is probably the biggest challenge of the modern world. And I'm going to tell you something that made my wife almost leave me, something I was doing that I didn't even realize was destroying our relationship. You're in the middle of a conversation and your phone lights up. Just a quick glance, nothing urgent. But somehow, the moment has already shifted. This is what psychologists call attention residue. When a part of your focus remains stuck in the last thing you saw or heard even after you've returned to the conversation. The brain tries to multitask, but it doesn't do it well. Instead, it switches rapidly, losing depth in both places. Prioritize presence over pings means choosing to be where you are, not just physically, but mentally. It's about resisting the tiny alerts, buzzes, and background distractions that pull you away from the people in front of you. In an age where everything competes for attention, notifications, news feeds, group chats, being fully present has become rare, but it matters more than ever. Studies show that people feel more valued and connected when someone listens with their full attention. No glances at screens, no distracted nodding. Presence builds trust. It tells the other person, "You matter enough for me to pause everything else." I've had to be really strict with myself about this. Living in a tech-heavy place like Lehigh, it's easy to feel like you always have to be on. Client emails, Slack messages, project updates, there's always something demanding attention. But I've started leaving my phone in the other room when I'm with my kid or my wife. And here's what's crazy. My wife told me months later that she'd been considering whether our marriage was going to work. Not because of any big dramatic thing, but because of this constant low-grade feeling that I was never really with her. Even when we were sitting on the couch together, I was scrolling. Even when we were having dinner, I was checking notifications. Even when she was telling me about her day, I'd glance at my watch to see if anything important had come in. She said she felt invisible. She felt like she was competing with my phone for my attention and losing. That hit me like a truck. I didn't even realize I was doing it. In my mind, I was just staying on top of things. I was being responsible. I was being available to my clients. But what I was actually doing was choosing digital urgency over human presence. So I made a rule. When I'm with my family, the phone goes in a drawer. Not on silent, not face down on the table, in a drawer, out of sight. That first week was genuinely difficult. My brain was literally addicted to the dopamine of notifications. I'd feel phantom buzzes. I'd have the urge to check just in case. It was uncomfortable. But after that initial withdrawal, something beautiful happened. Conversations got deeper. I noticed things I would have missed, like the way my son's face lights up when he figures something out, or the specific tone my wife uses when she's stressed about something but trying to hide it. Presence isn't just a courtesy, it's a cognitive choice, one that deepens connection, improves memory, and reduces stress. In a world designed to distract, choosing focus is a quiet form of rebellion. It says, this moment deserves my full self, not the fragmented version, not the half-here kind, but the one that notices, listens, and stays. If you can master this, you will become the most interesting person in any room, not because you're talking, but because you are actually there. People feel it. They might not be able to articulate what's different about you, but they'll know. They'll feel seen by you in a way that's become incredibly rare. But even when you are fully present, how you handle success and failure in a group will define your reputation for years to come. There is a specific way to handle credit and blame that will make people want to work for you forever. And I saw this principle in action in a way that literally changed my trajectory of my career. When something goes well, it's tempting to take the credit. When it goes wrong, the instinct is often the opposite, point somewhere else. But in strong relationships and effective leadership, the rule is simple: pass the praise and hold the fault. Psychologically, this principle taps into how people respond to fairness, trust, and emotional safety. When someone takes credit for a group's success without recognizing others, it triggers feelings of resentment and exclusion. But when a person shares praise generously, highlighting teammates, supporters, or collaborators, it strengthens connection and motivation. On the flip side, when things go poorly, holding the fault means taking ownership before shifting blame. This reflects what psychologists call an internal locus of control, the belief that you're responsible for your actions even in difficult outcomes. It's not about absorbing blame for everything, it's about being accountable for your part, especially when others might be watching how you respond under pressure. I saw this perfectly executed last year on a project I'll never forget. We had a massive SEO campaign for a mid-size e-commerce client. The goal was ambitious: double their organic traffic in 6 months. We built a whole strategy, assigned tasks across the team, and everyone was excited. 4 months in, the numbers weren't just bad, they were terrible. Traffic had actually dropped. The client was furious. We had a meeting scheduled, and everyone on the team was terrified. We all knew whose fault it was. One team member had missed a critical technical SEO update, another had published content without proper keyword research, I had overlooked a major algorithm change that shifted the entire landscape. But our project manager, Sarah, did something I'd never seen before. She stood up in front of the client and said, "This is on me. I didn't set the strategy correctly, and I didn't give the team the tools they needed to adapt when Google changed their algorithm. We're going to pivot completely. Here's the new plan." She didn't throw anyone under the bus. She didn't say, "Well, if so-and-so had done their job." She just owned it, held the fault completely. And here's what happened. Because she held the fault, the team didn't feel like we were being sacrificed. We felt protected. We felt like she had our backs. So we worked twice as hard on the next phase. We stayed late. We collaborated in ways we hadn't before. We were determined to make her look good because she'd stood up for us. 3 months later, we didn't just hit the original goal, we tripled their traffic. And when we presented those results, Sarah did it again. She passed the praise. She said, "This success is because of the incredible work from our content team, our technical SEO specialist, and our analysts. They figured out solutions I never would have thought of." The client was thrilled. Our team felt valued. And Sarah? She became the kind of leader people would follow anywhere. Contrast that with another manager I worked with earlier in my career. When things went well, he'd present the results as, "I did this." When things went wrong, he'd immediately point to whoever made the mistake and throw them under the bus publicly. The result? His team stopped taking risks. They stopped being creative. They just did the bare minimum to avoid being the scapegoat. And within a year, half the team had quit. In friendships, families, and communities, giving someone credit for their effort while taking responsibility for your own missteps models emotional maturity. It shows that praise isn't a competition and that accountability isn't weakness. People remember who gave them credit and who stood up when things went sideways. And those small decisions in everyday interactions are what shape how you're seen, not just as capable, but as someone worth following. Here's what most people don't realize. Passing the praise doesn't diminish you, it elevates you, because people see that you're secure enough to share credit. And holding the fault doesn't make you look weak, it makes you look strong, because it takes real strength to say I was wrong or I should have done better. But being a good person isn't just about how you handle big projects and dramatic moments, it's about how you handle small requests for help. Most people think they're being kind when they offer help, but they're actually just making it harder for the person they're trying to support.
and I didn't realize I was doing this until someone finally called me out on it.
Most people want to be kind. They'll say things like, "Let me know if you need anything," or "I'm here if you want to talk." But in practice, those offers rarely turn into action, and that's what this idea gets at. Kindness is doing, not offering. From a psychological standpoint, offering kindness feels good to the giver. It checks a box. I said something supportive. But to the person on the receiving end, especially if they're stressed or struggling, a vague offer can feel like one more task to manage. It requires them to identify a need, find the right way to ask, and risk feeling like a burden. Kindness becomes more meaningful when it skips the offer stage and moves straight into something practical. If a friend is having a hard time, don't just say, "Let me know if you need anything." Show up with a meal, text them a playlist, water their plants. These small, concrete actions are easier to receive and far more impactful. Psychologically, this is tied to a concept called social friction, the little barriers that make it harder for someone to accept help. Vague offers create friction because they shift the work back onto the person who's already depleted. Doing something specific lowers that barrier completely. I remember when my wife and I first moved into our house in Lehigh. We were exhausted, surrounded by boxes, and I was trying to manage a new SEO client who needed a rush job. I was running on maybe 4 hours of sleep. The house was chaos. We hadn't even unpacked the kitchen yet. Friends kept texting, "Let me know if you need help. If there's anything I can do, just say the word." And I appreciated the sentiment, I really did. But here's the thing. I was too tired to even think about what I needed help with. The idea of having to text someone back with a specific request, coordinate a time, explain what needed to be done, it felt like more work. Then my neighbor, who I'd only met once, came over. He didn't text first, he didn't ask. He just walked over with a two-wheeled dolly, grabbed 3 of the heaviest boxes from the garage, and started moving them into the basement. He didn't say, "Let me know if you need help." He just did it. That 10 minutes of work meant more than 100 "let me know" texts because he removed all the friction. I didn't have to ask, I didn't have to coordinate, I didn't have to feel like a burden. He just saw a need and met it. After he left, I thought about all the times I'd said, "Let me know if you need anything" to people, and I realized I was doing the same thing. I was offering in a way that felt good to me but didn't actually help them. So I started changing how I show up. When a friend's parent died, I didn't text, "I'm here for you." I showed up at their house with groceries, specific things I knew they'd need but wouldn't think to buy. Paper towels, toilet paper, coffee, easy meals. I didn't ask if they wanted company. I just said, "I'm going to sit on your porch for an hour. You don't have to talk to me. I'm just here." When a coworker was overwhelmed with a project, I didn't say, "Let me know if I can help." I looked at their task list, picked the easiest 3 things, and just did them. Then I sent a message. "I knocked out those 3 items. They're done." Words of support matter, but action delivers the real relief. Kindness that's visible, physical, and low pressure makes people feel genuinely cared for. And often, it's not the size of the gesture that matters. It's that someone noticed and acted without waiting to be asked. That's when kindness really lands. Here's what I've learned. Specific kindness is memorable kindness. "I brought you soup" beats "let me know if you need anything" every single time. Because one requires nothing from the person who's struggling, and the other requires them to do more work. But you can't be kind to others if you are burning yourself out. Most of us think that working until we collapse is the only way to be successful. We treat rest like a reward we have to earn. But if you want to be effective, if you actually want to show up for people, you have to fundamentally change your mind about what it means to stop. And this lesson almost cost me my health before I finally understood it. Most people treat rest like a reward, something you earn only after the work is done. But in psychology, rest isn't a luxury or a break from productivity. Rest is a strategy. This idea is based on how the brain and body handle sustained effort. When we work non-stop, especially under pressure, our focus, decision-making, and creativity all start to decline. That's because mental energy, like physical energy, isn't infinite. Cognitive fatigue sets in when we push too long without a pause, leading to mistakes, slower thinking, and burnout. In psychological research, short breaks, especially when taken before exhaustion hits, are shown to boost performance. Whether it's a few minutes away from your screen, a walk between meetings, or a full day off, Rest improves the brain's ability to reset and refocus. I used to think that hustle culture was the only way to grow my career. I'd stay up late writing SEO reports, I'd skip lunch to take client calls, I'd never take weekends off. I was busy, but I wasn't actually getting better. I was making stupid mistakes in my code and my scripts that I'd have to fix the next morning. I was forgetting important details in client meetings. My work quality was declining, but I couldn't see it because I was too tired to notice. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I literally fell asleep in the middle of writing an email, just passed out at my desk, woke up 3 hours later with my face on the keyboard and JJJJJJJJJ typed across the screen. That was my wake-up call, or rather my fall asleep at your desk call. I started researching how elite athletes train, how musicians practice, how surgeons maintain precision through long shifts, and the pattern was obvious. They all build rest into their process. It's not what happens after the work is done, it's what makes the work possible. So I tried an experiment. I started scheduling breaks the same way I scheduled meetings. 20 minutes of walking at 2 p.m. every day. No work on Saturdays, not even email checking. 8 hours of sleep, non-negotiable. And here's what's wild. My productivity went up. My quality went up. I was making better decisions because my brain wasn't running on fumes. I was catching errors before they became problems. I was more creative, more emotionally regulated, more present with clients. Reframing rest as part of the process changed everything. It meant putting recovery time into the schedule, not just filling every hour with effort. It's not about doing less, it's about doing smarter. A rested mind makes better decisions. It's more creative, more emotionally regulated, and more resilient. Athletes build rest into their training to recover and perform better. Musicians and surgeons use structured pauses to maintain precision. When you treat rest like fuel instead of a prize, you become more consistent over time. You don't wait until you've burned out to recharge. You build in recovery before you hit empty. Rest isn't what happens after the work is done. It's what makes the work possible. I think about it like this. Imagine your brain is a phone battery. You can use it until it hits 1% and then scramble to find a charger. Or you can plug it in when it hits 30% and keep it charged. Most people wait for 1% and then they wonder why they're always in crisis mode. And once you are rested and observant, you'll start to see things in other people that they haven't seen in themselves yet. This is one of the most powerful things you can do for another person. It can literally change the path they are on. And someone did this for me when I was at my lowest point. Sometimes a single comment sticks with you for years, not because it was flashy or loud, but because it caught something true. You're good at this. You've got something here. Those words matter, and that's the idea behind spot potential, name it aloud. In psychology, this ties closely to the concept of positive reinforcement and self-efficacy. People often can't see their own potential clearly, especially when they're unsure, starting out, or stuck in self-doubt. When someone else notices a strength and says it out loud, it gives that quality shape. It makes it real. This doesn't mean empty flattery or generic praise. It means paying attention and being specific. For example, instead of saying, "Great job," it sounds more like, "You asked a really thoughtful question in that meeting. You have a real instinct for getting to the core of things." That kind of feedback is memorable because it's focused and believable. The psychology behind this is powerful. When you name someone's potential, it helps build their internal narrative, the story they tell themselves about what they're capable of. That narrative influences how much risk they take, how they handle setbacks, and how far they're willing to push themselves. I remember when I was first starting out in tech support, I was really nervous. I felt like I didn't know enough. Every call felt like I was one wrong answer away from being exposed as a fraud. I was seriously considering quitting and going back to retail, where at least I knew what I was doing. But after a few weeks, my supervisor pulled me aside. His name was Marcus, and he was one of those naturally calm people who made everyone around him feel competent. He said, "I've been listening to your calls. You have a way of making people feel calm even when they're screaming. That's a rare skill. Most people either get defensive or robotic. You stay human. Don't lose that." I had never thought of myself as calm. I just felt like I was trying to survive the call without getting fired. But because he named it, because he pointed to something specific and said this is valuable, I started to believe it. I leaned into it. I practiced it. It became part of my identity. That one comment shaped the next 5 years of my career. I built my whole approach around that strength Marcus had spotted, and eventually it's what made me good enough at communication to transition into a role where I was writing and creating, not just answering phones. This can happen in any context. A coach noticing leadership in a quiet athlete, a friend pointing out emotional insight in a conversation, a teacher seeing curiosity in a student who thinks they're just not smart. These small recognitions don't just feel good, they guide development. Noticing is one thing, but naming it clearly and out loud gives it weight. It says, I see this in you, and sometimes that's what makes all the difference between someone giving up and someone pushing through to discover what they're really capable of. Here's the thing. Most people walk around with strengths they don't even know they have. They're too close to see them. But you can see them. And when you name them out loud, when you say this thing you did, this is special, you're not just being nice, you're giving someone a map to their own potential. But how you treat people in the small, unimportant moments, like when there is only one piece of food left, can tell them more about your character than any big compliment. There is a test that happens at almost every dinner table, and most people fail it without even knowing they're being tested.
You're at a dinner table with friends. There's one slice of pizza left. Everyone sees it. No one touches it. That last piece becomes more than food. It turns into a quiet social test. In psychology, this moment plays out through the lens of reciprocity, norms, and altruism. We're wired to notice acts of fairness, and offering someone the last slice, especially when it's something desirable, is a small but meaningful act of social generosity. It signals that you're prioritizing the group over yourself, not because you have to, but because you want to. But here's where it gets interesting. When you offer it and mean it, it lands differently. People can often detect hesitation or performative politeness, that awkward pause, that slow reach after saying, "You sure?" It tells others the offer came with strings. True generosity, even in tiny moments, is felt when it's clean. No guilt, no expectation of praise, just a genuine act of sharing. In behavioral studies, researchers often refer to this as costly signaling. The idea is that real generosity involves giving up something of value, not just offering what you didn't want anyway. The last slice of pizza is a perfect low-stakes example of that. It's not about the slice, it's about the signal. I noticed this pattern at a work lunch a few months ago. There were 6 of us and we'd ordered 3 pizzas. As we got toward the end, there was one slice of the good pizza, the one with the fancy toppings that everyone had been excited about. Everyone saw it, but everyone was doing that polite dance where they pretend they don't want it. One guy reached for it, then pulled back and said, "Anyone else want this?" But the way he said it, the way his hand was already kind of claiming it, made it clear he was just checking the box. He didn't really mean it. Then my coworker Sarah said, "Actually, I think Dave should have it. He's been crushing this project and deserves an extra slice." She pushed the plate toward Dave. The energy shifted immediately. It was such a small thing, but everyone noticed, because it wasn't performative. She wasn't offering something she didn't want. She was genuinely giving up something she wanted for someone else's benefit. Dave tried to refuse, but Sarah insisted. And here's what I noticed. For the rest of the day, people treated Sarah differently, with more respect, more warmth, because that tiny gesture had revealed something about her character. These kinds of gestures quietly build trust. They teach people how you behave when no one's keeping score, and over time, they shape how you're remembered in a group. So when the last slice is sitting there and you say, "You can have it," and you really mean it, you're not just being nice. You're reinforcing the kind of culture people want to be part of, a culture of unspoken respect, shared space, and good faith. One small action that leaves a lasting impression. And if you do mess up in front of that group, maybe you trip or drop your glass or say something awkward, the fastest way to regain your status is to be the first person to call it out. And I learned this lesson in the most embarrassing way possible. You trip over your own feet in front of a crowd. It's awkward. Everyone sees it. But then you say, "And that's why I never became a dancer." Suddenly, people laugh with you, not at you. That's the psychology behind laugh at yourself before anyone else can. This idea taps into a concept called self-deprecating humor, and when used thoughtfully, it's a powerful social tool. In psychology, it helps reduce embarrassment and build connection. When you acknowledge your own missteps with a bit of lightness, you take away the sting and the target. It signals confidence, not insecurity. When you laugh at yourself, you're showing others that you're not fragile. That moment of self-awareness lowers social tension. People no longer have to tiptoe around your mistake or worry about how you'll react. You've already taken the pressure off. This is especially useful in moments that feel publicly uncomfortable, misspeaking during a presentation, spilling something in a meeting, or fumbling through an answer. Making a quick joke or acknowledging the moment with humor creates psychological safety for you and for the people watching. I was giving a training session once to about 30 people on SEO best practices. I was about 20 minutes in, feeling confident, really in the zone. I was explaining the difference between on-page and off-page optimization, and I said, with complete confidence, "So, meta descriptions are one of the most important ranking factors Google uses." Which is completely wrong. Meta descriptions don't directly affect rankings at all. It's a rookie mistake. I saw two people in the front row look at each other with confused expressions. One guy raised his hand tentatively. "I thought meta descriptions weren't a ranking factor." My face went hot. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. I had two choices. I could get defensive and try to backtrack and make excuses, or I could own it. So I just laughed and said, "You know what? You're absolutely right. That was a brain fart of epic proportions. Clearly, I need more coffee before I try to explain basic SEO. Meta descriptions help with click-through rates, not rankings. Thanks for catching that before I led everyone astray." The whole room laughed. The tension broke, and we moved on. What could have been a credibility-destroying moment became a humanizing one. Because I laughed at myself first, people didn't feel awkward. They didn't lose respect for me. If anything, I became more relatable. Psychologically, it's an act of emotional agility. You're flipping potential shame into shared amusement. And in many cases, it's this kind of honest, lighthearted response that builds trust, diffuses judgment, and turns awkwardness into relatability. People don't remember perfection. They remember how you handled the stumble. And if you can laugh at yourself, genuinely, not in a self-loathing way, they'll remember you as someone who's confident enough to be human. But being confident doesn't mean you should always be talking. In fact, knowing when to withhold the truth is just as important as knowing when to say it. Even the most helpful advice can be a weapon if the timing is wrong. And I learned this the hard way when I tried to help someone and ended up making everything worse. The truth can be solid, clear, and even helpful, but say it at the wrong moment and it can land completely wrong. In psychology and everyday life, what you say often matters less than when you say it. It's not about lying or withholding important information. It's about understanding emotional readiness. When someone is overwhelmed, exhausted, or emotionally raw, they're often not in a state to process even the most reasonable feedback. In those moments, dropping a hard truth can feel more like an attack than support. Take this example. Right after someone receives bad news, you might feel the urge to offer perspective. "Everything happens for a reason," or "you'll come out stronger." These statements may be sincere, but when said too soon, they often come across as dismissive. The person isn't ready to zoom out. They're still in it. Our brains need time to calm down before we can process complex or abstract ideas. If you give people insight while they're still emotionally flooded, they won't absorb it. They'll just react. I learned this with my brother. He called me one night in complete panic. He'd just been laid off from his job. He had a mortgage, 2 kids, and no savings. He was spiraling. And what did I do? I immediately went into fix-it mode. I started listing solutions. "You should update your resume tonight. There are tons of jobs in your field right now. Maybe this is actually a good thing. You've been complaining about that job for months. This could be an opportunity to find something better." All true, all reasonable, all completely unhelpful in that moment. My brother got quiet. Then he said, "Can you just, not right now?" I felt defensive. I was trying to help. But he was right. He didn't need solutions yet. He needed to feel his feelings. He needed to panic and be scared and process the shock of it. If I had just said, "Man, that's terrifying, I'm sorry," and stopped there, I would have actually helped. The solutions could have come later when he was ready to hear them. Waiting until both sides are calmer increases the chance that the message will be heard and understood. Knowing the right time to speak is a skill and a powerful one. It means reading the emotional temperature of a moment, recognizing when someone's still processing, and choosing to wait instead of rushing in. Because even the most well-intended truth needs the right conditions to take root. Think of it like planting a seed. You can have the best seed in the world, but if you try to plant it in frozen ground, it won't grow. You have to wait for the thaw. And while you are waiting for that right moment, you can give them something that is much more valuable than advice or solutions or truth. You can give them your presence. But not the kind of presence most people think of. I'm talking about something deeper. Someone shows up with a perfectly wrapped gift, but as they hand it over, they're distracted, glancing at their phone, not quite listening. The gift might be appreciated, but what's missing is the thing that actually builds connection, their full attention. Give presence, not just presence, is about recognizing that attention is one of the most valuable forms of care. Psychologically, it signals validation. When someone puts down their devices, maintains eye contact, and responds thoughtfully, they're communicating, "You matter right now." It's easy to assume that gifts, objects, are the main currency of appreciation. And while they can be meaningful, research consistently shows that emotional attunement has a much deeper impact on relationship satisfaction. Presence communicates safety, it builds trust, and it allows people to feel truly seen. In everyday life, this might look like turning off notifications during dinner, not multitasking while someone shares something important, or simply staying with a conversation instead of mentally rehearsing your next reply. These small acts, though invisible, create emotional warmth that's hard to replicate with material items. I remember a time when I was really struggling with a work project. I'd taken on a client that was way outside my expertise. I was in over my head, making mistakes, and genuinely worried I was going to have to give them their money back and admit I couldn't do it. I was stressed to the point of not sleeping. My wife could tell something was wrong, but I kept saying I was fine. Then, one Saturday, my friend Nathan showed up at my house. He didn't call first, he didn't text, he just rang the doorbell. I opened the door and he said, "I'm coming in, we're going to sit on your porch." He didn't bring a gift, he didn't bring food, he just brought himself. We sat on my porch for probably an hour and a half. We didn't even talk that much. He asked what was going on, I gave him the basic story, and then we just sat. At one point, he said, "That sounds really hard. I don't know what to tell you, but I'm glad you're figuring it out." That was it. That was the whole conversation. But the fact that he was just there, with no agenda, with no phone out, with no rush to leave, it meant more to me than any Amazon package could have meant. A memory of someone listening without judgment, a quiet afternoon where time didn't feel rushed. These experiences aren't just felt, they're stored, and long after the gift is forgotten, the presence remains. Presence also has psychological effects for the giver. When you're fully engaged, your own stress levels drop, your empathy strengthens, and your sense of connection grows. Giving attention isn't just kind, it's regulating. And if you want to make that presence even more powerful, you should look for the small good things people are doing and call them out right as they happen. Not in some formal, planned way, but spontaneously, in the moment. A compliment that catches you off guard often sticks with you longer. It feels real, honest, maybe even a little surprising. That's the power of spontaneity. The idea that compliments land best when they're spontaneous comes from how people process sincerity. In psychology, we tend to trust feedback that feels unrehearsed. When a compliment seems planned, overly polished, or timed to impress, it can come across as strategic instead of sincere. Spontaneous compliments, by contrast, feel like natural thoughts that made it to the surface. You see someone solving a problem quickly and say, "That was smart thinking." Or during a conversation, you pause and say, "You explain things in such a clear way." These moments feel genuine because they weren't clearly designed to win favor, they just happened. This taps into something called perceived authenticity.
When a compliment doesn't feel like it's trying to achieve anything, approval, attention, or influence, it's easier to trust. The brain responds positively to praise, but it responds better when it senses that praise wasn't manufactured. I was in a meeting last month with a junior colleague who was presenting research she'd done on keyword trends. She was nervous, you could tell from how fast she was talking and how she kept apologizing for rambling. But about halfway through, she made this connection between seasonal search patterns and product launches that I hadn't thought of. It was legitimately insightful. So I just interrupted her in a gentle way and said, "Wait, that's actually brilliant. I've been doing this for 10 years and I've never thought to map it that way. Keep going." Her whole demeanor changed. She slowed down, her confidence visibly increased, and the rest of the presentation was significantly better. After the meeting, she came up to me and said, "Thank you for saying that. I almost didn't include that part because I thought it was too obvious." The compliment landed because it was spontaneous. I wasn't trying to be encouraging. I was genuinely surprised and impressed, and I said so in the moment. Spontaneity doesn't mean being careless. It means being present. The best compliments often come from actually paying attention, not from remembering to say something nice. And when people feel like you notice them in real time, not just out of politeness, they're more likely to remember it, believe it, and feel valued because of it. This also applies to timing. Compliments given immediately after noticing something feel more connected. Waiting too long or delivering praise in a scripted or routine way can dilute the impact. It feels like an obligation rather than a reflection of what someone actually noticed or appreciated. But what if someone is acting like everything is fine, but you can feel that it's not? Most people ask once and then walk away. They take "I'm fine" at face value. But if you want to be a real friend, you have to know how to ask twice. And this is the technique that has saved multiple friendships for me. In psychology, there's a concept called emotional masking. It's when people hide what they're feeling to appear composed, strong, or just to avoid uncomfortable attention. "I'm fine" is often a reflex, a quick way to signal, "I don't want to talk about this right now." The first time you ask, "How are you?" most people give the automatic answer. But when you check in a second time, calmly, kindly, and without pressure, it sends a different signal. It says, "I actually care about the answer." That small act of asking again can be the difference between someone staying quiet and someone opening up. This doesn't mean pushing for details or demanding vulnerability. It means giving people permission to share more if they want to. For example, after someone brushes off a first check-in, following up with, "Are you sure you're okay?" Or even, "If there's more going on, I'm here," lets them know the door isn't closed. This approach works because it creates psychological safety. The first ask tests the waters. The second ask shows consistency. It proves your concern wasn't just polite small talk. I had a friend who I could tell was going through something. We'd been friends for years and I knew his patterns. He'd stopped responding to texts as quickly. When we did hang out, he seemed distracted. But every time I asked if he was okay, he'd say, "Yeah, I'm good," and change the subject. Most people would have taken that at face value and moved on, but something told me to check in again. So one day, after he'd given me the usual "I'm good," I waited a few seconds and then said, I feel like that's not totally true. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but I'm here if you do." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "Can we go for a walk?" We walked for 2 hours. He told me about how his marriage was falling apart, how he felt like a failure as a husband and a father, how he'd been going to therapy but felt like nothing was helping, how he'd been considering some pretty dark options. If I had taken "I'm good" at face value, I never would have known, and I honestly don't know what would have happened. The second ask matters because it shows your concern is real. It shows that you're willing to sit in the uncomfortable space of, "This might be awkward, but I care enough to ask anyway." In both personal and professional relationships, people often remember who circled back. That second check-in tells them they're not invisible, And for someone who's struggling, knowing they're being seen, even just a little more closely, can make it easier to take the next step towards honesty, support, or simply feeling less alone. Here's what I've learned. The first, "I'm fine," is usually a test. People want to see if you really care or if you're just being polite. The second ask is where you prove which one it is. But when people are acting in ways that frustrate you, it's easy to judge them. It's easy to create a story in your head about why they are being difficult. But there is a principle that will save you from so much unnecessary conflict and anger, if you can actually apply it in the heat of the moment. A person cuts you off in traffic. Your first instinct? Probably anger. Maybe even the thought, they did that on purpose. But most of the time, they didn't. They just didn't see you. This idea, assume error, not malice, is a simple but powerful mindset shift. In psychology, it's tied to something called the fundamental attribution error, our tendency to blame others' actions on their character rather than their circumstances. When someone's late to a meeting, we might think they're lazy. If they miss a message, we think they're ignoring us. But more often than not, the cause is something mundane: traffic, stress, forgetfulness. Not a personal slight, just a human slip. Assuming error doesn't mean being naive or ignoring patterns of behavior. It just means that our default explanation should leave room for imperfection, not ill intent. This mental shift lowers unnecessary tension. It slows reactive judgments, and it can prevent small misunderstandings from turning into big conflicts. In practice, it looks like pausing before responding, giving someone the benefit of the doubt, saying, maybe they didn't realize, instead of, they knew exactly what they were doing. I had a client once who stopped responding to my emails. For 2 weeks, radio silence. I'd send updates, questions, requests for approval, nothing. I started getting angry. I thought, they're ignoring me. They don't respect my time. They probably hired someone else and didn't have the decency to tell me. I was building this whole narrative in my head about how unprofessional they were. I was drafting a strongly worded email about communication and respect. But before I sent it, I decided to try one more thing. I called their office. The receptionist answered and said, "Oh, didn't anyone tell you? She's been in the hospital for the past 3 weeks. Her father had a heart attack and she's been staying with him in intensive care." I felt about 2 inches tall. All that anger and judgment, and the reality was that she was dealing with a family crisis. She wasn't ignoring me. She was trying to keep her father alive. Assuming error first gives us space to see more clearly and often to respond with more grace. It's a habit that requires restraint, but it builds resilience in relationships. This principle invites curiosity instead of confrontation. Humans make mistakes constantly. That's not cynicism, it's reality. But if we treat every slip-up as an attack, we burn bridges before we even understand what happened. Assuming error first creates space for actual communication. It allows you to ask, "Hey, I haven't heard from you. Is everything okay?" Instead of, "I can't believe you've been ignoring me." One creates connection, the other creates conflict. And if you are communicating digitally, where people can't see your face or hear your heart, you have to be even more careful about how you send your messages, because there is a form of communication that most people ignore that could prevent about 90% of digital misunderstandings. A simple "sure" in a text can mean 10 different things: excitement, sarcasm, resentment, indifference. The words don't change, but the tone does everything. That's where voice notes come in. When a message is emotionally layered or context sensitive, tone becomes essential, and text, as convenient as it is, strips away most of that nuance. Psychologists call it paralinguistic communication, the pitch, pace, volume, and rhythm that add meaning to what we say. These subtle vocal cues are lost when we reduce complex emotions to flat characters on a screen. That's why something intended as playful might come off as cold, or a message meant to reassure could feel abrupt. Voice notes restore that missing layer. They let warmth come through, or softness, or seriousness. Hearing someone's actual voice can prevent misunderstandings before they spiral.
It signals effort, care, and presence. It says, "This moment matters enough to speak out loud." I had a situation last year where I needed to give some difficult feedback to a team member. They'd missed a deadline that caused problems for a client, and we needed to talk about it. My first instinct was to send an email or a Slack message. It would have been efficient, clear, professional. But I realized that anything I wrote could be misread. "We need to talk about the missed deadline" could sound angry, disappointed, or threatening, depending on how they read it. And once that tone is misperceived, it's really hard to walk it back. So instead, I sent a voice note. I said, "Hey, I wanted to check in about the deadline that got missed yesterday. I'm not mad. I just want to understand what happened so we can prevent it next time. Can we grab coffee this afternoon and talk through it?" The warmth in my voice, the genuine curiosity rather than anger, came through. When we met up, they said, "Thank you for the voice note. I was terrified when I realized I'd missed the deadline, but the way you said it made me feel like we could actually fix this instead of me just getting yelled at." Of course, not every message needs a voice note, but when the content is complex, when emotions are mixed or timing is delicate, voice can do what text can't. In digital communication, clarity isn't just about choosing the right words, it's about delivering the right feeling. And when the stakes are high, your voice is often the better vehicle. It carries not just information, but intention. But even when you speak with the perfect tone, you still have to know when to say no. Most people are so afraid of saying no that they end up betraying themselves just to keep others happy. And this pattern will destroy you if you don't learn how to break it.
Nobody likes being told no, but how it's said makes all the difference. This is a principle rooted in empathy and social reciprocity, treating others the way you'd want to be treated when roles are reversed. A decline doesn't have to be harsh, dismissive, or awkward. In fact, a thoughtful no can actually strengthen trust because it shows honesty with care. It's not just about saying no, it's about how you say it. When someone asks for help, time, or inclusion, and you can't say yes, the delivery matters. A response like, "I really appreciate you thinking of me. Right now I can't commit, but I'd love to be involved another time," delivers the same message with clarity and respect. Declining with warmth and specificity shows that you're not avoiding the person, just the task or timing. Psychologically, this helps preserve relational trust. It also helps reduce people-pleasing patterns, the tendency to say yes to everything and then resent it later, or do a half-hearted job. I used to be a chronic people-pleaser. Someone would ask me to help with something and I'd say yes, even when I was already drowning in work. I'd say yes even when I didn't have the skills they needed. I'd say yes and then do a terrible job because I was stretched too thin. This pattern came to a head when a friend asked me to help her move on a Saturday. I had already committed to helping another friend with a website that same day, plus I had a family commitment that evening. My schedule was completely full. But when she asked, I said, "Yeah, sure, I can probably make it work." I couldn't make it work. The day was a disaster. I showed up late to the move, exhausted and resentful. I did the bare minimum and left early. I never got to the website project, which damaged that friendship, and I was irritable with my family that evening because I was so drained. 3 people ended up disappointed in me, when if I had just said no to one request with clarity and warmth, only one person would have been disappointed, and they probably would have understood. Now, when someone asks for something I can't do, I say something like, "I would love to help with this, but I'm completely booked this weekend. Can I check my calendar and see if there's another time that works? Or maybe I can connect you with someone else who might be able to help." That response acknowledges the request, declines clearly, and offers an alternative. Most people respond well to that because they can feel the genuine care behind it. Ultimately, saying no is part of life, but when done with empathy, it becomes more than a refusal, it becomes a message of mutual dignity. And that's something people remember far more than the no itself. And as you move through physical space, don't forget that you are sharing that space with thousands of other people who are all fighting their own battles. There is a tiny gesture that takes zero effort but creates massive goodwill. You don't need a sign to know when you're standing in the way. Whether it's at a subway exit, a store entrance, or just a crowded sidewalk,
Learning to step aside without being asked is one of the simplest forms of social intelligence. This behavior reflects pro-social behavior, actions intended to benefit others, even in small, everyday ways. It's not about grand gestures, it's about recognizing shared space and adjusting yourself so that others can move more freely. The mental skill behind it is called situational awareness, noticing what's happening around you. Who's trying to pass? Who looks rushed? How much space are you taking up? When you move without being asked, you're reducing the mental load on others. You've already solved the problem they were silently facing. This small move also activates reciprocal altruism. People who witness or benefit from these unnoticed kindnesses are more likely to pay it forward. Social harmony often hinges on these unsaid, low-effort choices. I notice this most at grocery stores. There's a certain type of person who stands in the middle of the aisle with their cart, completely blocking traffic, utterly oblivious to the fact that people are trying to get around them. They're not being malicious, they're just not paying attention. And then there's the person who sees you coming and smoothly moves their cart to one side before you even have to slow down. They don't make eye contact, they don't wait for thanks, they just create space. The second person makes the world work better. They reduce friction, they make everyone's day just slightly easier. Stepping aside isn't dramatic. It doesn't earn applause, but it creates ease, preserves flow, and shows you're aware of others. It's one of those tiny signals that tells people, I see you. Your time and space matter. And here's what's interesting. When you start doing this consciously, you'll notice how rare it is. You'll notice how many people are completely absorbed in their own world, creating obstacles without realizing it. And you'll start to see opportunities everywhere to just make space for others. But what about when things are really going wrong? When you've had a day where you feel like you failed at everything, when nothing went right and you're ready to give up? You have to be very careful how you label that day, because the label you choose might determine your entire future.
Some days just don't go your way. You spill coffee, miss a deadline, argue with someone you care about. By noon, you've already decided this is a bad day. But psychology suggests a more useful habit. Learn the lesson before labeling the day bad. This connects to how the brain processes experience. When something negative happens, we tend to apply a sweeping judgment. It's called cognitive filtering, focusing on what went wrong and using it to define the entire day. But this pattern can lead to unnecessary stress and pessimism. The alternative is cognitive reappraisal, stepping back, noticing the situation, and asking what it's trying to teach you. Instead of saying, this day is ruined, you might say, that conversation didn't go well. Maybe I need to rethink how I approached it. The focus shifts from labeling the day to extracting insight from it. That small shift from judgment to learning changes how the rest of the day unfolds. It helps reduce rumination, the loop of negative thoughts that can intensify stress. It also builds resilience, your ability to bounce back from setbacks by reframing how you see them. I had one of these days about 3 months ago. I woke up late, which made me rush through my morning routine, which made me forget my laptop charger. I got to a coffee shop for a client meeting and realized I'd left my notes at home. The meeting went poorly because I wasn't prepared. I spilled coffee on my shirt. I got a parking ticket because I forgot to move my car. By 2 p.m., I was ready to label it, this is a terrible day. Nothing is going right. But then I caught myself. I asked, what is this day trying to teach me? The lesson was actually pretty clear. I'd been cutting corners on my nighttime routine. I used to prep everything for the next day before bed, charge my laptop, lay out my notes, set out my clothes, but I'd gotten lazy about it, thinking I could just handle it in the morning. The bad day was showing me that this approach wasn't working. I needed to go back to the evening prep routine. So instead of spending the rest of the day in a spiral of everything sucks, I just acknowledged, okay, I learned something. I'll fix this going forward. That reframe allowed me to salvage the afternoon. I had a productive work session, a good dinner with my family, and went to bed feeling like the day had taught me something rather than defeated me. A day with a setback isn't automatically a bad day. It's a day with feedback, and by learning from what went wrong, you build a more balanced view of both yourself and your circumstances. And if you are working with others, if you are in any kind of leadership position, even if it's just being a friend or a parent, you have to be the person who helps them learn from their mistakes without making them feel small. Because how you deliver criticism will determine whether someone grows or shuts down.
Nobody likes to be called out in front of a group, even when the feedback is well-meaning, but almost everyone appreciates being recognized when others are watching. That's the psychology behind coach in private, praise in public. This idea is built on two core emotional needs: dignity and recognition. In psychology, criticism can trigger a threat response when delivered in front of others. It feels exposing, even humiliating. When coaching or correcting someone, doing it in private protects those emotional needs. It creates a space where the person can reflect, ask questions, and improve without feeling judged by a larger audience. On the flip side, public praise builds morale. It reinforces behavior and shows others what's valued, all while giving the person a moment of visible appreciation. This balance creates a culture where people feel safe to contribute and honest about mistakes. It protects people's self-respect while reinforcing progress. And in any setting where people are learning, performing, or growing, that balance can turn average relationships into high-trust, high-functioning teams. I learned this lesson from the worst boss I ever had. He was the kind of manager who would call you out in front of the entire team if you made a mistake. Public humiliation was his management style. He thought it would motivate people to not make mistakes. What it actually did was make everyone terrified to take any risks. We stopped proposing new ideas. We stopped asking questions because we didn't want to look stupid in front of the group. We just did the bare minimum to avoid being the next person he embarrassed. The team fell apart within a year. Contrast that with the best manager I ever had. She had a rule: mistakes happen in private conversations, wins happen in team meetings. If you screwed something up, she'd pull you aside, close the door, and walk through what went wrong and how to fix it. No shame, no audience, just problem solving. But if you did something well, she'd make sure everyone knew. In the team meeting, she'd say, "I want to call out the amazing work Sarah did on the client presentation. She went above and beyond, and it shows. Thank you, Sarah." The result? People felt safe to try new things because they knew mistakes wouldn't be weaponized. And they worked hard because they knew good work would be recognized. In friendships, families, and communities, giving someone credit for their effort while taking responsibility for your own missteps models emotional maturity. It shows that praise isn't a competition and that accountability isn't weakness. People remember who gave them credit and who stood up when things went sideways. And those small decisions and everyday interactions are what shape how you're seen, not just as capable, but as someone worth following. But never, and I mean never, use your humor or your position to make someone feel even smaller than they already do. Because there is a type of teasing that destroys people, and most people don't realize they're doing it. Some jokes land, others hit like a quiet slap. Teasing might seem harmless, just part of how people bond. But when someone's already feeling small, self-conscious, or unsure, that same joke can echo louder than intended. Instead of bringing connection, it creates distance. This points to a basic truth. Context matters more than content. A comment that's funny in one setting can be painful in another, especially when it reinforces the very thing someone is trying to hide. People who feel insecure are already in a defensive mental state. Their stress response is subtly activated. A well-meaning tease about their mistake doesn't challenge that inner critic, it amplifies it. Psychological safety depends on knowing when to lean in and when to ease off. Noticing when someone is already pulling away is a sign of empathy. The goal isn't to toughen them up, it's to make space where they don't have to be tough at all. I saw this happen at a family dinner last year. My nephew, who's about 12, was trying to tell a story about something that happened at school. He was nervous, stumbling over his words, saying a lot, forgetting details and going back to fill them in. Halfway through, my uncle said, "Come on, buddy, spit it out. We don't have all night," and laughed. It was meant to be playful, light teasing, but I watched my nephew's face change. He got quiet, mumbled, "Never mind, it's not important," and stopped talking. For the rest of dinner, he didn't share anything else. He'd shrunk, and that one joke had done it. What my uncle didn't see was that my nephew was already nervous about telling the story. He was already worried he was being boring or taking too long. The tease just confirmed his fear. If my uncle had said, "Take your time, we're listening," the whole thing would have been different. My nephew would have finished the story, felt heard, and probably been more confident the next time he wanted to share something. The skill here is noticing when someone is already in a vulnerable state and choosing not to poke at that vulnerability, even playfully. Some people can take a joke when they're confident and secure, but when someone is already doubting themselves, already pulling back, that same joke can push them further into isolation. Watch for the signs: avoiding eye contact, apologizing unnecessarily, self-deprecating comments, physical tension. These are signals that someone's not in a place to be teased. And here's what's important to understand. Being kind in these moments doesn't make you soft. It makes you perceptive. It makes you someone people feel safe around. And that safety is what allows people to eventually grow confident enough that they can take a joke. And finally, when you've really messed up, when you've hurt someone or broken trust or done something you regret, don't try to talk your way out of it. Don't explain and justify and add context. Just say you're sorry and mean it. When you've hurt someone, your instinct might be to explain, to go into detail, to clarify everything. But often, the longer the apology, the harder it is to hear. Apologize without a paragraph is about keeping the focus on accountability, not justification. In psychology, apologies are most effective when they validate the other person's experience and acknowledge harm. The moment you start adding reasons, backstory, or disclaimers, the apology starts sounding like a defense. A simple, "I'm sorry I hurt you, that wasn't okay," goes a lot further than a long list of reasons why you were tired or stressed. The second version subtly shifts the spotlight away from the person who was hurt. Leading with a clean, direct apology communicates that you're not trying to soften the impact or dodge responsibility. Psychologically, short and sincere apologies are easier to trust. They allow space for the other person to respond, rather than making them sit through your reasoning. People aren't asking for a full explanation. They just want to know that you get it and that you care enough to own it. I used to be terrible at apologies. I would say things like, "I'm sorry I snapped at you, but I was really stressed about work and I hadn't slept well and I'd just gotten off a difficult call," and by the time I finished explaining, the other person would be more annoyed than before I apologized. Because what they heard wasn't, "I'm sorry." What they heard was, "Here are all the reasons why what I did wasn't really my fault." I learned to cut through all of that. Now, when I mess up, I say, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. It was hurtful. And I was wrong. Period. End of apology." And then I stop talking. I let them respond. I let them have space to express how they feel without me jumping in to defend myself or explain myself or minimize what I did. The difference is night and day. People actually accept the apology. They actually forgive because they can feel that it's real. The best apology I ever received was from a friend who had betrayed my confidence. She told someone else something I'd shared in private. When I confronted her, she didn't make excuses. She just said, "You're right. I broke your trust. I'm sorry. I should have kept that to myself." 4 sentences. That's it. No explanation about why she did it, no context about her relationship with the other person, just ownership. And because she didn't try to justify it, I could actually forgive her. We rebuild the trust over time. If she'd given me a paragraph of excuses, I don't think I could have. That is the final rule. If you can do these 25 things, if you can truly embody these principles, you will find that the world starts to open up for you. You aren't just a person moving through the world, you are someone who is helping to shape it. You're now ahead of 99% of people who are still trying to figure out why their lives feel so hard. Because the truth is, most people are walking around blind to these unwritten rules. They're wondering why conversations feel difficult, why relationships keep breaking, why they can't seem to connect with people the way they want to. But you now have the map.
You understand the invisible spiderweb of human interaction. You know how to pull on the threads without breaking the web. You know how to create social gravity that draws people to you instead of pushing them away. These aren't just nice things to do, they're the actual mechanics of how human connection works. The psychology behind why some people build deep, lasting relationships and others struggle to keep friends. The reason why some leaders inspire loyalty and others inspire resentment. And here's the beautiful thing. You don't have to master all 25 at once. Pick one, practice it for a week, notice what changes, then add another. These principles compound. Each one makes the others more powerful. Start with listening to understand. That alone will change 50% of your interactions. Add in win-win thinking, then effort-based compliments. Build from there. The people who master these rules don't do it because they read them once, they do it because they practice them daily until they become automatic, until it's not something they have to think about, it's just who they are. So here's my challenge to you. Pick one rule from this list, just one, and practice it intentionally for the next 7 days. Notice what happens. Notice how people respond to you differently. Notice how your relationships start to shift. Because that's the thing about these unwritten rules. Once you start following them, you can't unsee them. You'll notice when other people break them. You'll notice the friction it creates. And you'll notice how much easier your life becomes when you follow them. You now have the manual for being human that nobody gave you in school. Use it, practice it, master it, and watch as your life transforms from hard mode to easy mode. Watch as doors open, as people seek you out, as relationships deepen, as conflicts dissolve before they escalate. This is the secret language that's been happening around you all along. Now you speak it fluently. If this resonated with you, if you found even one rule that made you think differently, do me a favor. Share this with someone who needs it, because these principles are too valuable to keep to yourself, and the world desperately needs more people who understand how to be human together. Subscribe if you want more deep dives like this, more psychology, more practical wisdom, more tools for navigating this complex, beautiful, frustrating experience of being a person trying to connect with other persons. You've got this. Now, go practice.